Okay, everybody, welcome. Hi, Cinnamon. We're recording this session, just so everybody knows. And this month we have a really special guest joining us, Tim Russ, actor, writer, director, musician, and a man of many interests and talents. And we're going to talk to him about his career and his interest in the business. Tim, I guess to start, I read up a little on your bio and I saw that you traveled a lot in your younger days and graduated from a high school in Turkey. Um, did those experiences play into your being a creative person?
Well, they might have lent themselves to being to pursuing acting, particularly working in front of camera and on stage. While I was in high school overseas, I was working on musicals and things like that and plays. And I think that just the bopping around every 2 years, probably lent itself to the lifestyle that is akin to working as an actor. Because your lifestyle is somewhat of a gypsy-esque sort of a feel anyway. You're always going from one job to the next, and you're not sure exactly where you're going to be 20 minutes from now. And everything can happen in a blink of an eye or an instant. And that's how I grew up. I mean, every time we turned around, we had to move someplace every couple of years. So, and you never knew when that was going to be and where you were going.
Yeah.
But inevitably you were moving and you were going.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, a lot of people in this business have come from military backgrounds. So there's definitely something to be said for being used to that kind of uncertainty or that unpredictability, which is what this business is based in, pretty much.
Yeah. Did you? Was there a moment in your life when you, in your mind, you transition from, oh, this is a fun thing to do, to, I think I might want to do this for my career?
Yeah, I when I pursued theater in college, I went to college and I studied for a total of about 5.5 years. I went to undergraduate school in Texas, then I did some graduate work in Illinois. So the point that I decided to leave home and go study this for a degree in college was the point that I decided I was going to pursue it as a potential career, and so and thus I did. So it was at that point. I was 18 at the time, so that's when I decided to go for it and see what was going to happen. And I started working professionally before I left college. I was in Austin, Texas, and I was working. There were projects that would come through, commercials and local shows, regional shows, and then, and in my case, a masterpiece theater project that came through for PBS that I was able to book. So I actually worked professionally before I left college. And then the time I decided to move to Los Angeles is when I really, that's the culmination of deciding you're going to pursue this thing, in the trenches firsthand. And that was in 1981 when I moved here.
Okay. And so it sounds like some of your early professional opportunities were on the stage.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of the work that I did, in training was on stage and theater, and then the gigs that I booked in Texas were film gigs. I did work, like I said, on a film projects, a couple of them before I left Austin. But the biggest break I had when I got to Los Angeles, the first big break I had, was actually a stage play. It was Dreamgirls with Jennifer Holliday. When the show came from New York to LA, I booked the fourth male principal role because it opened up when they moved here. And so I just auditioned with a lot of people and managed to book it. So that was the first good sized break that I had while I was here. It doesn't necessarily translate to film and television work right off the bat. That is not a direct line to that. It looks good on the resume, and it's a great experience and decent money for that time, but it doesn't translate directly to film and television. So I still had to make the break in that area as well, which came, I don't know, a year and a half like that, a year and a half later after that.
Now, I'm obviously a technical person behind the camera, but I understand that acting on the stage is somewhat different than acting for a camera. Is there something you'd care to say about that?
Well, typically stage acting might be, the performing might be a little bigger, a little more broad, because you have to reach, the back of the theater for the most part, even if you're using microphones, which is what a lot of large plays are using these days. Everything is mic'd and everybody is mic'd, so they can hear you with a whisper, but your facial expressions, your body movements, everything has to be fairly big so that we can be seen in the back of the theater, in the cheap seats. So it's a different style than working in theater. The film is the camera is here. The camera does all the speaking, and your expressions can be very subtle. It can just be the eyes in many cases, and the camera's going to pick all that up, especially nowadays. And so the style of acting definitely is more contained. It's smaller in some cases, and that's not to say that every scene or every bit your play is going to be you. There's times where we can go off, and be just as big and wild and crazy as you please, and the camera's going to get all of it. So there are moments when either one of those types of acting will work. But generally, just in terms of average dialogue and scenes that are pretty, run of the mill, or pretty, I want to say average and routine, exposition, things like that, those don't have to be over the top. And those are typically going to be much more subtle, because the camera does a lot of work for you.
Did you as a young developing actor, did you take specific courses or workshops or do some coaching to assist in the transition from stage to camera?
Oh yeah. I mean, even after arriving to Los Angeles, I took a number of different workshops, acting workshops and classes. It's a good idea to do that on a semi-routine basis. Whenever you get the time and the money to do it, you should take workshops and classes. I have to admit I'm delinquent right now in taking any classes. I haven't taken any for a while, and I should be taking some myself, just to keep your chops up and to explore some things. And it's like going to the gym and working out. So if you're not working on a regular show on a regular basis, it's not a bad idea to do that sometimes, to to take a workshop or a class at some point, or even if it's a weekend seminar.
I'd like to explore directing with you a little bit later in the conversation, but let me take a quick sidetrack and ask, as a director, as a writer, how valuable are the acting classes? Like if somebody, for instance, Gabriel, who wants to be a director, what would you advise him to do in terms of having some experience, some personal experience with that process?
It cannot hurt to, for either a director or actor, certainly an actor, to take workshops or classes. Those are really invaluable, because you can take a couple of different classes from different instructors, and it's a good idea to go ahead and audit those classes. If you want to take a class, usually they'll let you audit a class, that you sit in on a class to see if you like the style and the way in which the instructor is working and teaching. And once you find one that you feel comfortable with, it's always a good idea, because again, you're taking you're working specifically on a piece of material, and you're really, really working it, and you're really getting knee deep into it. You're hearing feedback from some of the other students. You're hearing feedback from the instructor. You're able to exercise. It's like going to the gym. And if you work those muscles out, those muscles are going to be a lot stronger, so that when you get a piece of material that you're reading, and that material, similar to the way a sculptor can look at a block of wood or a piece of granite, and they can see the figure inside the sculpture before they start working on it. They can see the image of what they're going to do. So in this sense, when you get a piece of material after you've taken a class or two, and you've gotten your child a little higher, you've worked and stretched a little bit, your muscles have been toned up, when you look at that piece of material, you can see things in that material that you may not have caught before. The classes can be cold reading workshop classes that teach you about auditioning techniques. They can be scene study. All those things will come to bear when you get those sides for that audition piece that you have to read for and self-tape for. And now you look at that material and you see it differently than you might have before the class. It literally happened to me. I was auditioning for sitcoms. at one point in my career, because I started out working drama. I was doing a lot of dramas, and I was working, you know, in television projects one after the other, booking dramas. But the comedies that I had to read for, I wasn't nailing. These are 3-4 camera sitcom stuff. It's 1, 2, 3, bang, 1, 2, 3, bang on the jokes. And you have to, and they were flipping, you know, the lines have to transition from one to the other inside of one paragraph. You go from one thing to another. There's a lot of gear shifting and stuff to make the joke work. And I wasn't booking them. And my agent at the time suggested I take an improv comedy class. And I did. I took an improv comedy class for over a period of 6 months, maybe 7, maybe 8. I don't remember how long it was, but it was a while. And consequently, as soon as I finished that class, it wasn't less than a month or 2, I started booking the comedies as well. I booked like 4 or 5 comedy projects within a year or 2. So it made a difference, because when I looked at that material, I could see where the jokes were. I could see where the comedy beats were and what they were looking for those beats, if you weren't playing a straight man. So that actually helped, hands-on helped me, just by taking those improv comedy workshop classes firsthand. So that the classes definitely work. They make a difference.
Yeah, I have a friend who's one of the groundlings, and I know that group has you know, produced a lot of people who went on to Saturday Night Live and Second City.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Another question I'll ask you, and it might be a little naive since I'm not an actor, but working with people who study in the different schools like Meisner or method acting, when you work with people like that, somebody maybe who has a different process than you, do you ever have to make adjustments? Is there a dance you do, or externally does it just manifest in a way that you can automatically engage with?
Are you talking about if I'm working with somebody in the capacity of directing them, or capacity of working with them as an actor?
Well, I was speaking as an actor, but I think that both answers to both of those would be interesting.
You know, when it comes to film work, film and television work, you know, you've got to hit your marks, and you've got to say your dialogue. And however you can get to that process is fantastic. You know, at the end of the day, no matter what your prep is, whether it's Meisner or whether it's someone else, as long as you get there, when they say action, you hit your marks and say your lines and play those beats, all is good. You know, for me as a director, I don't care if they take an hour to prep for it or if they take 10 minutes to prep for it, as long as when it's time to roll and I've got to get these 3 shots off before the sun goes down, they manage to do that. That's what's the most important. It's a very technical process, and it relies on a lot of factors coming together. And sometimes it's not as comfortable as it could be for an actor, because of the situation, because of the camera, because, you know, you're playing to the inside of a matte box with a piece of red tape on it. You know, if Meisner can help you get to that moment where you're emoting to a piece of tape, then all the power to you. To me, I don't care, as long as you get there. And it's a process, and it's not an easy process either. I got to say, you know, the parts that I played, I haven't had that many where I had to really dig super deep into some gnarly stuff to get to bring up the emotions. I haven't had that many of those types of roles as of yet. I mean, over the course of my career, and it's just a matter of circumstance. It's a matter of, you know, chance. That's just what's been. So those kinds of things. If I was to take a class, I would be looking to try to work on pieces that where you had to really dig deep for the emotional beats and the emotional moments in a scene, to try to get the stuff that's really hard to do. That's where I would go if I was taking classes.
I'm going to interject just a second, because we've had some people join us. I want everybody to know we're recording this, and we'll share it in the group later. Tim's been kind enough to agree to do a little bit of Q&A after. We've got about an hour and a half with him. So my thought is, if you have questions as he's speaking, go ahead and put them in the chat. That way they'll be queued up in order, and I will ask those questions to him when we get to that part. So Tim, here's a question then. Can you speak a little bit about the time period and the process between when you arrived in LA as an aspiring actor and the time that you really kind of achieved some momentum in your career and considered that, you were now a working actor? What was that process like for you?
Well, well, I'd say overall unpleasant. It was very, very tough. It was, I wasn't making that much money. I was living in a crap apartment and, pretty much on my own, trying to pay the rent and the bills and to keep my car running and auditioning for stuff and sending stuff out. At the time, it was very different when I started because, it was like going back to the prehistoric times in terms of the way the landscape of the business is now. There was no self-tape. There was no internet. There was none of that. There were no cell phones at the time either, by the way. When I started in 1981, there was answering machines and hardline telephones and pay phones. That's what you had. That was your day. That was your routine. So essentially waiting for, a call to come in, checking your answering machine, make sure you've got, if there's anything important to return a call, stopping at payphones all day long, submitting pictures and resumes to potential casting notices when they came in. And this was all, and in trying to secure an agent, at some point in time, basically just hustling constantly, trying to get the opportunities to keep yourself busy, keep yourself in the loop, try to book gigs. I mean, that's all you were trying to do is get a break and get a gig, trying to find representation that could get you in the door so that you could read for a role that was actually substantial and could get your career rolling. And that took about 5 years, 5+ years for me from the time I hit the ground here. And I can't say that's an average or not. It was just, for me, it was 5 years before I got a break. And in that time before, it was pretty tough. I went to I had a couple of acting seminars that I went to and some things with casting directors. And I remember one of them said that they had a list of things that they said were, the sort of things that this business are about. You try to sum them up in a number of things, and the things that you need in order to make it from point A to point B. Obviously, networking was one of them. Is a very important thing, is networking. And that is before and or after you work with somebody, you want to maintain the network. You want to have the network because one thing can lead to another. You could be referred to somebody for a job, for a gig. I've referred people for jobs. People have referred me for jobs. That's really important because that can give you the break that you don't see coming. Once you do work for someone, you work really well with them. You do your job, you deliver, and you work easily with people. Don't burn that bridge because that bridge will come back to haunt you. So you've got to make sure you leave on a good note with these people that you work with on whatever job it is. So they remember you, and they might bring you back for something else. You don't know. You don't know which job it is that you're going for. You don't know which gig is going to come through or not. You don't know. You could have 35 gigs that you go out for, nothing happens. You miss 36, and 36 could have been the one that turned the tables. You also have to, what this casting director said, she said several things. She said you have to have the network, you have to have the talent and the chops. So you got to have your abilities. If the door cracks open, you have to be able to go in and get the job. If the door opens up, you got to be strong enough to at least deliver. If the casting director doesn't think you're right for this role, or the producer or the director doesn't think you're right for it, the casting director likes the read. So she'll bring you back for something else because she remembers how well you did.
Yeah.
And that gives you the next door and the next door and the next door. So you have that. So she said that was it. So networking, you have to have your chops together. You have to keep your contacts together. One of the other things, and you have to also you got to be patient. You have to accept the rejection because there's a mountain of rejection. And I mean a mountain of rejection. The word, the term that's showbiz never applied to anybody who just booked a series. That's not how it works. So you tell somebody that I just booked a series, they don't say, well, that's showbiz. That's not where that term comes from. It comes from losing the series. It comes from being booked on the series and then they decide after the pilot they want to get rid of you and replace you with somebody else for the show. That's what that term comes from. Also, what she said, I'll never forget, which is a great phrase: in this business, there are no rules, and they are strictly adhered to. So you see? So there's nothing written down, but yet it exists.
Yeah.
See, so that's what you have to understand about this business. There's not anything carved in stone, not anything written down, but there are things that are adhered to. There are rules that do exist. So the last thing she used, the term she used was rage. I thought it was interesting. Rage was a term she used, which meant that you have to be fearless, and you have to be, so vehemently enthusiastic. You have to be to the point where you demand getting this job. You demand being seen. You demand, getting a break in this business. And your fury about that is what keeps you going. And also to the point where if anybody else tells you, you might as well just give it up. Oh, come on, you've been doing this for so long, you're never going to make it. Then you got to get past that wall as well. That's what pushes you through that wall. So, everybody has a breaking point. Everybody has a point where they're going to throw their towel in, and that's going to be it. From a personal standpoint, you got to keep your overhead down. You got to keep your overhead down. You got to keep your life simple. You got to keep your costs down. You got to keep your time down and your commitment down. And that says, if you want to get married and have kids, you may want to consider doing something else other than this work. That's not going to happen, because you're never going to be able to support a family if you're trying to get acting work, unless you marry somebody who's got money and they can pay for you to sit around and go on auditions. Have at it, Hoss. If you get that, that's great. But if not, you want to keep your head, you want to keep your overhead down, and want to keep your life simple, and keep focused. Put all your energy and efforts into trying to get from point A to point B. And that's it. This is the hardest, most unbelievably difficult business you could possibly select. People ask me about, what they need to do to get into it. I usually tell them, think about something else, maybe, That's the first thing I say. You may want to consider something else. It's just that hard.
Yeah. I understand. I mean, it's, I've got a different career trajectory, but I've had the same experience with you. And I've also had the experience that, of the boom bust cycle that, for all your prior accomplishments, you can still have, periods of drought, which are just maddening.
Absolutely maddening. I just lost a directing gig that was last week. A call came out of the blue. I was just saying before, you don't know when the door is going to open. You don't know when someone might refer you to a job. Somebody referred me to these producers who are working on a project in Puerto Rico. They called me out of the blue. I've never heard of them before, never met them before. And they wanted me to direct their film. They have a feature. They've done about 3 projects already, and some of them with a couple of big names in them. They wanted me to direct their project. They prefer American directors over directors based in Puerto Rico. So they were coming to the States. They got a referral from someone in Canada. I don't even know who it was. I didn't recognize the name. I asked him twice. I said, who is this? And then I said, did they say what? I have no idea who they were. I've only done acting work in Canada. I've never shot anything up there.
Yeah.
So I don't know who this person was, but they recommended me. And they came to me. I met with them 3 days ago. I sat down, and I was supposed to shoot this project. The damn thing is shooting in 2 weeks. Yeah. I would have had 2 weeks to try to prep a feature film. I could do it, but unfortunately I had something else that got in the way. I couldn't change the schedule, overlapped by 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, and I could not change it.
Yeah.
There went that job, just that quick.
Yeah.
So the job came out of nowhere, would have been a good opportunity to round out the year, and it went away just as fast.
Yeah.
That's just the way the business is, man.
I understand. I had an offer for a feature once in Houston, and I was in Colombia shooting a commercial, and my return overlapped their pre-production by 1 day.
Oh.
The director was fine with it. The director said, for you, I'll give up a day of prep with you, but the EP said no way, and that was it.
Oh.
So.
Oh, man.
Here's a question I'd like to explore. You know, you touched on agents, and my experience with agents, and I think a lot of below the line people, you know, for us, our agents are not typically about sending us jobs or clients. It's more about they negotiate our deals for us.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that for actors, maybe that's a little bit different. And I wonder if you could speak about the process of your experience with agents, and also the question of what was the process of getting your first agent, and then what was the process of getting your first good agent?
You do need, as an actor, you do need some kind of representation, because even though you have opportunities online now through casting sites like Actors Access, Hollywood, whatever in the hell it is, casting, Hollywood Casting, or Hollywood, whatever it is, that's an online site. Actors Access, Casting, LA Casting, or Casting Networks, you can submit to projects through that on your own. You know, you pay the subscription per month, or you pay every time you submit for a gig. So you can do that on your own and without an agent, and you don't have to pay anybody 10%. But good luck with that. And those gigs, a lot of them, you know, many of them don't pay that well. The commercial stuff's pretty decent. That pays pretty well. But, you know, those are really, really hard to book, being what they are. You need an agent, a manager, to get you in the door for casting projects like series, television, or feature films, major feature films that are being done. So if you want, you have to try to find somebody to represent you, because the agents and the managers have the Rolodex for the casting directors. They have all the names and contacts and their personal relationships. In many cases, they all have personal relationships. They know that casting director. They can, you know, hobnob with them. They can sell you, and they can get information that nobody else can get, and they can get you in the door. So it's good to have the representation. I had at least 2 agents before I finally found one that worked for me. I had 2 agents that, you know, that just, you know, I had them. I had them to say that I had an agent, and they didn't really get me into the door to anything significant. The third agent I got eventually just, you know, it just walked away and got somebody else. And then the third time I got with an agency, worked out pretty well. Ultimately, I almost left that agency. As a matter of fact, by 1 week, or was it 2? 1 week, I was going to leave the agency, because the agent that they had with that agency was not booking me into anything that was substantial. I was only getting day player stuff, maybe. You know, he went that away, 1 day's worth of work, a line or 2 under 5s, and I wanted to try to get bigger roles, and they weren't getting me in. And so they fired her, and then I just said, well, you know, I'm gonna move on to a different agency. I was gonna look for somebody else. Well, the secretary there at the time, the receptionist said, look, why don't you just stick around? We're gonna hire somebody else in a week, and just don't leave, because you're gonna be without an agent for that time, so you might as well stay here and see what happens when we get this other person. I said, all right. Well, she talked me into it. Literally, she talked me into it. And the agent, they hired this other lady the next week, and she had been selling used cars, you know, 6 months prior to that. So she only just got her franchise, but she was a really good used car salesman. So less than 2 weeks after she got on, she got me in the door for a Paramount feature film, which I ended up booking. And that was with Craig Sheffer and Virginia Madsen. And that's when my career took off, right there.
That's terrific.
So if I had left the agency at that time when I was going to, I would have missed that opportunity.
And what feature was that?
That was Fire with Fire.
Okay.
Yep, D.B. Sweeney, Craig Sheffer, and Virginia Madsen. That would have been it. So, you know, here again, in hindsight, it's very, very clear in 2020. I can see that what have happened if I had made a mistake. In foresight, I just got lucky, because I made a decision that was pretty random at the time, you know, just based on someone's recommendation or suggestion. I decided to stay. And if I had left, I would have missed that train. That train would have gone by, and I don't know where I would be right now as a result. And when you think about it in that terms, there could have been opportunities I missed prior to that that I don't even know about. So there is that as far as the random element of this line of work.
So, Tim, you also have a manager and a publicist. Could you?
Yeah, I don't have a publicist. I had a publicist at one time.
Okay.
I don't have a publicist right now. I have somebody that has done some publicity work for me, but not under salary.
Okay.
Publicists are really expensive. They cost a lot of money per month. I don't really need one right now. You normally hire them when you're on if you're on a series, as a regular role and a substantial regular role on a series. Then you've got money and you've got a reason to hire publicists. They can get you into talk shows and things like that. But if you're not working, you don't really need them. But I do have a manager, yes, and an agent, yes.
And what's the difference? Like, what does your manager do versus your agent? Is there a synergy there, or do they each handle different aspects of the work for you?
Yeah, the manager will have their contacts. The manager's job is also to find you an agent. If you want to change your agent, or if you lose your agent, the manager's job is to find you an agent. And on top of that, they can book you. They can get work for you. They can bring auditions to you. My manager does all the time. And the agency also does it as well. The difference is a manager doesn't have as many clients as an agent has. Agent's got a whole lot of clients. So the agency doesn't necessarily focus all their time on you. The manager can focus more time on you and cultivate your career more so than the agent can, because they only have a handful of clients that they handle. And they have contacts also, their own personal contacts with certain casting directors that the agency may not have.
Yeah.
Those relationships. So it's okay. You got to pay, 20% out of your check, total, because you got to pay both of them 10%. But at the end of the day, it's just an extra tool in the box, man, for working on getting jobs.
Yep. It's a lot of what you've been saying so far. It really sounds like if I was to distill it, that a whole lot of this is preparation meeting serendipity.
There is a tremendous amount of serendipity when it comes to that. I cannot express to you how much serendipity there is. It is also absolute, unstoppable determination. If you don't have that, you might as well, like I said, go find another job. You're going to get smashed against the wall. I don't know how many times. If you are extraordinarily talented, say, for example, you're a comedian and you are really good at stand-up comedy, you might be able to write your ticket a little faster because you're that good. If you're a good writer, you might be able to write material for yourself and put yourself in it and give yourself a vehicle. A lot of people are doing that nowadays anyway. You might have an opportunity there. If you're an extraordinary talent, an extraordinary actor, you've got whatever that is that really gets you going. Either it's a physical look and or a combination of that and some really amazing, amazing talent. You can get to the top a little quicker. You'll have a break a little quicker. If you've got a saleable thing, if you're a character actor and you're just funny looking and you're just a funny person, you're going to be able to book a little quicker than the guy next to you. All of those things come into your toolbox. It's what you have in your toolbox. As far as being a performer, not talking about behind the camera, I'm talking about in front of the camera. So as far as an actor goes, you got to have that in your toolbox, and then you have to be lucky. You do have to be lucky. You do have to be at the right place at the right time. You do have to have that. It's really unpredictable. This business is. It is completely random as to when things and how things can happen. And it's just, I can't emphasize that enough. But without the determination, once you have all those tools in your box, without the determination to continue and to keep hitting it and to keep going and to keep trying, there's nothing left. And you could also consider, depending upon where you live and what's going on, you can consider maybe working a regular job or career to pay the rent and bills and even raise a family. And you could work in theater that's local. You can do regional theater. You can do local theater. You can do equity waiver theater. You can do and work, on stage and at least exercise that part of your life that you really enjoy and love without trying to make a career out of it. You have that option as well. That's like option B, for those people who don't want to pursue this and try to make a living out of it.
Yeah.
Making a living out of this right now, I can tell you, it just simply isn't that easy. It's just not that easy. Just because of the number of people in the business, the way the business has changed. There's gigs and parts and stuff out there for a lot of low budget crap that doesn't pay enough for you to survive on. So those kinds of gigs, you cannot rely on those gigs to make a living off of. You know, it's just a few extra bucks and a chance to work out, but it's not going to be enough to get you going. And that only leaves series regular work on all kinds of shows, many of which don't shoot in Los Angeles. They shoot all over the place. They shoot in Atlanta, they shoot in Canada, they shoot in Australia. They ain't shooting here. So a lot of that stuff is not even in town. You have to go someplace else. They're going to cast a lot of those roles right there where people are living. So the parts are for those big juicy roles are kind of far and few between, and not that many that are available. So, you know, again, from an acting standpoint, it's, you know, it's not pretty. It's just not pretty if you want to try to make a living out of it.
Yeah. Let's talk about directing. When did you have that moment where you thought that was something you would like to do? And then talk a little bit about your preparation and then getting some of your first opportunities to actually sit in that chair.
My break came from being on the series Voyager. When I was on Voyager for 7 years, I just went to the executive producer and said, I'd like to be able to direct an episode or have the opportunity to do one. And they said that sure, you know, because they have a tradition of doing that on the Star Trek franchise. So it took 3 years of internship. I had 3 seasons of sitting in pre-production meetings, sitting in the editing sessions with the executive producer, observing directors on set and shadowing them, and watching the editing process, which turns out to be the most important. The editing is really the key if you want to be behind camera. You have to understand how scenes are cut together, because when you're shooting, you should be thinking about how the scenes are going to cut together. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem when you get them in the editing bay and they don't make any sense. So if you're going to tell a story via the editor, when you're shooting, you have to know what's going to be cut together in your head before it's ever cut together. And that was the most valuable time that I could spend. So I interned for 3 years on that series, and then they did give me an episode to direct. And then from there, I was able to go off and shoot, I don't know, 16, 20 some odd short films for a producer in Orange County. Then I came back, did some reenactments for Discovery Channel, shot about 3 years worth of those. And then about 2 or 3 features and some other things since that time, and still going on to pilot presentations recently. So it took, I had the opportunity to go ahead and intern in that. I did take a class, directing class before then, or at the same time rather. And so I was doing that as well. But the internship really is what made the difference.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you can find stuff on Google. You can find information on Google. You can get books, how-to books on directing, just to get the basics done and all that good stuff. But a lot of time, it just takes time, spending time on a set and observing and shadowing other directors to see how they work.
Yeah.
That's really the best hands-on experience. That and sitting with an editor who's cutting together raw footage that's been shot that day, the dailies, as they're called. Yeah. Those scenes that when you're cutting together and assembling the rough assembly of a scene, that's when you learn how to shoot things, because the editor will sit there and say, oh my God, I wish I had a shot of XXX, or I'm missing a shot here, or I wish they shot this longer, or, you know, whatever, you know, that's when you learn what it is you want to make sure you're doing when you're on the set. You want to make sure you have A, B, C, and D, so that the editor knows what, you know, has got stuff to work with when you get into the bay.
Did the experience of preparing to direct and then also directing, did that in any way evolve your process as an actor?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. Obviously, one can help the other back and forth easily, because you're working with actors, so you have to you know how to communicate with them. I know how to communicate with actors. Yeah, you know, and I kind of can gauge their temperament and their personality, and you have to figure out, well, if I want to get, you know, to a certain point here, here's what I can say to them to get to that certain point. If I need this certain reaction, or I need an emotion, you know, something that's beyond just, you know, faster, funnier, bigger, smaller, whatever. Something beyond that, I can find a way to communicate with them, because I'm an actor as well, and I know, you know, what they're going through. I know what they're under. I know what they're trying to achieve. And sometimes they'll come to me and they'll have a problem, and we can talk through it and figure out how to reach it. With film, you have different options. I can say, well, let's shoot it this way, and then let's try it that way, and then let's try it this way. And then I'll have three different options to work with, and they all have three different ways of approaching that moment and that beat to see which one plays best.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the wonder of television. I mean, you've got a chance to do it 2 or 3 times, and you can decide later on. But it does help to have that relationship. It helps to have the background, if you're a director, to understand, you know, how to communicate with actors. And if you're an acting director, then you know what you need to say. Again, a lot of times, what the key is making sure that whoever you cast is right for the role in the first place. Whoever you cast did the reading, and you love the reading. So when you get on set, you know, it's maybe just a couple of minor tweaks, you know, or just a suggestion to hold this beat a little longer. Don't say it, just wait, you know, or give it, you know, go ahead and say that a little quicker, or go ahead and throw that line away, you know, little stuff like that. You know, give it to me, you know, give me a little bit more there, or give me a little bit less. That's essentially all you have to do if you have cast it properly,
yeah,
to begin with. And if you're doing your job as a director, you want to make sure that the actor or actress has the walk and talk that you're looking for before you put them in the film. That's what makes your job easier. You know, otherwise you're pushing the ball uphill. You know.
In the casting process, are there what are you looking for? Are there any particular tools that you use in testing those actors up against those roles, or, you know, reading two actors together?
Generally not. You know, I might give some notes based on what their read was in one take or another. That happens often. You know, that give you notes. We'll pull this back a little bit, or, you know, instead of playing it this way, play it that way. Apart from those notes, you generally just let them roll on that stuff. And I'm looking for the natural sort of feel. Every actor or actress has a cadence. They have a timbre in their voice. They have a sound, the way they speak, the way that they carry themselves, the way they walk, the way they talk. It's particular to them. And if that role is a character type role, it's a role that is a character, and that actor and actress comes in and they have the physicality, they have the mannerisms, they have the cadence, they have the nuances that already exist for this character, well, then it's easier to book them. You know, if in the role that I played on Star Trek, if I had not been, you know, the height and build that I was, I wouldn't have booked the role.
Yeah.
If I didn't have the speech dialect that I have, I would not have booked the role. It's just that simple. If I didn't have the personality traits that might lend themselves to that role, I would not have booked the role. So it just comes down to being exactly right for that part. This is a picture business. That's what this is. It's a picture business. When the businessman, the tycoon character is supposed to walk through the door, before they have uttered a word, you got to believe that they're the tycoon. You got to believe that they're all about, you know, the business, and that they're in charge. You got to understand that. When the meek and mild secretary, you know, is trying to appeal to her coworker, she has to have that feel. She has to have those the mannerisms. You know, when the nasty cheerleader is picking on the other girl, you have to believe that she has that personality, that attitude. She has something in her voice that carries that. You know, when the strong, you know, mom, you know, the mother that takes no crap from anyone, you got to see that from the time that they walk into the room before they even utter a word. You got to believe that they have that going on. Otherwise, it's not gonna play, man. I tell people who are starting out, I said, look at television. Do you see yourself in the movies and TV? Do you see yourself in any of these roles? If you don't see yourself in those roles, then you might as well call it a day.
Yeah.
You know, do you have a gnarly scar on your face? Do you look like, you know, death warmed over? Do you look like a killer? Do you look like a, you know, the fat, fun friend next door, the chubby sidekick? I mean, whatever. You know, do you have a sense of humor? Are you always joking around? Do you have a, you know, whatever. You have to see yourself as those characters, because this is a picture business. We have to believe that the people we see on the character, you guys have done it before. I've done it not long ago. I saw you guys watch a movie or TV show, and this character walks in and they're supposed to be somebody, but you look at them and go, there's no freaking way that that person is going to be that role. You just don't buy them in the role. You don't believe them in the role. Well, you've lost that bit. When you don't believe who that person is, if they're not selling it, you know, and you're not buying it, then they've lost you as an audience. You're lost. They're not going to take your project seriously.
That leads me to, I beg your pardon, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's all right.
That leads me to the question that, have you ever had an actor come in who wasn't necessarily the type described in the, in the casting notice? Maybe it was a woman reading for a man's role or something like that, but they came in and they presented themselves in a revelatory way, and they gave such a compelling read that you cast the role actually against type, that you went in a different direction just because that actor embodied it better than what had originally been conceived.
I may have had something like that happen once, not too often, but I am certainly not against doing that. If I see something that's really intriguing and different, I'm going to go for it. Yeah. So if I'm sitting behind the table, I'm going to say, well, you know what? That's not what we had in mind, but damned if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if it works, I'm going to run with it. As of yet, I haven't really had that many opportunities for that kind of thing. And usually those opportunities arise in projects that are like independent films and things like that. Mm-hmm. Not so much for television, because television tends to be more cookie cutter, more stock.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they don't want people to, be sitting there and wondering what's going, how come, wow, that's weird. And then all of a sudden they lost the next 30 seconds. They're not listening. You want everything to just go like this. You don't want people to get hung up on something that doesn't make sense. Whereas in an independent film, all of the roles that I've played over the years, the most interesting parts that I've played have been in indie films, independent films, crappy pay, long hours, whatever came out to. But the best roles, the most interesting roles, have always been independent films compared to television.
I've had a similar experience with indie projects. I've only done one studio feature, and that was I was the second unit guy on Warner Brothers Torque. But it was so written by committee. I remember every day they would fax us new pages. I mean, literally one day I walked in to this office in Palm Springs and they handed me pages, and I said, we shot that this morning. I mean, that's how, down to the wire they were sending this shit to us. And it was just so underwhelming. But then I've done, like what you're saying, these indie projects that are, they're more gritty and they're lean, but they're so well written and they're so edgy and they're so there's this one that I did called Cook County that I did in Texas, and it's a very dark film about people who deal meth. But I worked with Anson Mount and Xander Berkeley on that, and those guys just blew me away. Everybody threw their hearts into making that thing happen.
Yeah, the indie film roles have been the most interesting. The parts that I've read for, and I've actually, on my demo reel, I've got a piece on there that's years old, and I'm not taking it off because it's that good. Yeah. It's that different from everything else on that reel. Yeah. It stands out, and I'm not taking it off as a result. And I don't look that young in that piece because of the makeup and hair and everything else, but I kept it because it's that good. All the interesting stuff has almost always been independent films, consistently so. So I really like, from an acting standpoint, they've been the most interesting and the most challenging. Like I said, the pay has always been crap, but they've always been good roles.
I've got so many more questions for you, but I'm gonna kind of wrap this part of it up because I want to get to the Q&A.
Sure.
Let me end the conversation about directing by asking you this question. From where you sit right now, as a director, what kind of opportunities are you looking for? What, maybe not necessarily pie in the sky, but where would you like to go next? What kind of things are you exploring and putting feelers out for, and just kind of, keeping an eye out on the horizon for?
Well, I can't, anything, typically I gravitate towards anything that I haven't already shot in terms of genre. So I'm looking for something that's always, usually that's different. in terms of the style. So if a project comes along where it's a style that I don't have a lot of footage that I've rolled on, that kind of thing, this project that I just lost would have been one of those. And I would have liked to have had that under my belt. So I'm just looking for that kind of thing generally. Otherwise, it does not matter to me. Whatever that project is, if I'm able to shoot it, it's written reasonably well, I'm there, and I'll shoot on it. But if it's the extra cherry on top is if it's something that I haven't shot before in terms of a style and genre. Because then, you know, if you have a sample of all of that and you're going for a particular project, I can just pull that sample out and say, here's what I got. You know, or you can say, here's 4 samples of what I've done to show the versatility. So you've got that. So, but it just depends on what the style is. I'll go for something particularly that's got an end, that's a different style of film. Other than that, like I don't have a huge broad comedy on my reel, you know, like a wacky, crazy comedy. I don't have any of that. So if I get a chance to do that, I'd take that right quick.
Yeah, I absolutely sympathize with you there. It's always a very special thing when somebody trusts me, you know, and has the imagination to know that I can take on something that they don't necessarily see in my reel. You know, this is the business so often where you get hired to do what you can already show you do. You know, where literally somebody might say, we're shooting an almond commercial, and you've got an almond commercial with the mom, but we have a dad. So you don't have experience shooting the almond commercial with the dad. You know, just ludicrous stuff where they don't understand the process. You know, they don't realize what imagination means.
Oh, commercials. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Absolutely the worst. That's those mediums are just, they're nightmarish, all of them. So it's they pay really well, but they are a nightmare to work on, for sure.
Let me transition over to some questions.
Sure.
Gabriel, I'm looking at your questions. Was that answered in our dialogue?
It was actually, but I have another question ready,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in how, as an actor, you keep a character fresh when you keep playing them consistently for a long period of time, like your character on Star Trek Voyager. Like, how do you keep that role fresh, and how do you keep it from becoming like stale or a caricature of itself? And just what's your relationship with that character really like after playing it for so long?
A lot of times what defines characters on a series, especially over a period of time, is the writing. The storylines and the writing are what makes the difference, because every storyline that the writers give you and every moment that they give you can change the nuances of your character. That can broaden the character, give the character more backstory, give the character more depth, give the character another angle or another situation that they have to get out of, can show a different side of them. And it's all about the writing. You know, series or project or film project doesn't go anywhere unless you got the writing that's done. So for me, it's about the writing. There were times where, Voyager, I mean, you know, where I was on the bridge saying the same crap that I just said, you know, the last 3 weeks in a row, because, you know, it's just that moment in time. And there's nothing I could do. I told him, I said before, dude, why don't you just use the footage we just shot last week? It's the same shot and it's the same lines. So why don't you just use that, you know? But you couldn't, and you have to do whatever the directors want you to do and the producer. So, you know, that stuff, yes, monotonous. But as we went on, there were eventually episodes where the character was, the story was focused on the character, and I was able to spread my wings and do some different things. Those were always the gemstones. Those were always the things that made it, that kept it interesting and kept it alive. Otherwise, if it wasn't those, it was maybe a beat or two or a scene or two with one of the characters that was kind of tricky or kind of interesting or could have been funny or tongue-in-cheek, and that kept it alive as well. It comes down to the writing, and I cannot emphasize enough about writing. In any of this business, I cannot emphasize enough about the writing. I auditioned for a piece just recently, independent film, you know, police captain, as if I haven't read for that stuff about 1 million times. Police captain in a police station, whatever. Well, they gave me these 2 or 3 scenes. This thing's written by a British guy. He's a director from Great Britain. And so he doesn't have a handle necessarily on the sort of the American sort of dialect and American sort of nuances in the way we speak. So a lot of stuff was overwritten in the sides. It was like 4 pages or something. And so I just rewrote the whole thing. I mean, almost the whole. I rewrote all the lines. I rewrote, scratched this stuff, cut this, rewrote that, and I auditioned. Actually, I don't do that often. I typically don't rewrite all the audition pieces, especially if they're from major feature projects or TV shows. I don't do that, and I don't need to because they're written well. This was not written well. So I just said, I'm not reading all this nonsense. I'm going to go ahead and change all these. And I ended up booking that role anyway. So if and when they get around to shooting it, I have that part. But the bottom line is the writing is goddamn critical. From a direction standpoint, I'm sure Brad said to go through this. If you get the scripts, you're looking at it and go, what in hell? This is not even shootable. And if it's not that, you're an actor. And these days in acting, there's 2 other projects I've done the same thing on. Independent films, they give it to me. And if this thing ain't making any sense, man, I'm going to insist upon being able to rewrite it. I'm going to insist on making revisions or insist on getting them to do it, something, because it's not, you're hamstringing yourself. If you stand on the screen and say shit that doesn't make any sense, or you're saying something that's just stupid, or saying something that's not written well, just in terms of dialogue and the way the dialogue flows, the way the phrasing is. You know, do you say the same thing 3 times in one paragraph? Well, no, you need to only say it once. You know, so all these things, the writing, it comes down to. So developing the characters in a series, what keeps it alive is the writing. It's always about the writing. Everything is about the writing. You know, we don't have any television. I don't care, network, HBO, I don't care, Netflix, nothing, 0. If you don't have somebody writing this stuff who knows what in the hell they're doing. And that's my biggest peeve these days, is the writing of projects that I'm approached by or approached for. I look at the writing. And there's very few projects I've looked at where I could just read them and it's like not have to do a single thing. Most television stuff is written well because those are experienced staff writers and they know what they're doing. A lot of it does sound similar and sounds kind of the same or whatever, but it's still written like people speak. You know, it's written normally. It's written with phrasing properly. It's written with a twist or a turn, or it's got whatever else is in it. And it's interesting and it's okay and it's cool. That stuff is written well. But a lot of crap out there is not. And I do mean crap. Unshootable and unworkable and unusable. You know, because everybody thinks they can. That's my biggest gripe. So if any of you guys are working in that area or going that way or come across stuff like that, writing. The writing has to make sense, right? The roles got to make sense. The story's got to make sense. The points got to make sense. You know, if they ain't hitting it, man, somebody's got to say something. If you have the ability or the power or the say-so or the whatever, you know, the option to be able to suggest, you know, that maybe, you know, can I say it this way? Or how about if I could do the line, am I able to do the line that way or whatever? Does it feels a little more comfortable this way or the phrasing makes sense or whatever? So, you know, it's, you know, you come across this stuff. When I started out, no, I didn't do too much of that because I was just starting out. But again, the stuff that I was reading for was written well. You know, nowadays, yeah, not so much. So
I've got a kind of a 2-sided follow-on to that question. The one is, in your series experience, have you felt that you've had access to the writers to at least present some ideas for the long-term direction of your character? And the other side of that is as a director, when you're directing, what is your process in eliciting, you know, perhaps the actor's input on the dialogue and the performance, you know, their interpretation that might be unexpected?
if the actors, I give the actors leeway. If they want to phrase something or do something a little differently with the dialogue, I absolutely let them do so. And try this or try that. There's no reason why they can't, you know, as long as it's not really mucking up all the, you know, 100 cue lines for everybody else. If they're reasonably on, if it's just making minor tweaks and changes, that's fine. I mean, I expect it if they know what they're doing. And again, hopefully the writing is tight enough where they can actually flow with it. But if it's not word perfect, I'm not going to scream and holler. Unfortunately, on Voyager, it had to be word perfect. So there was no change unless you called and asked the producers ahead of time if you could change literally a word. But in most of these projects, it's not quite so much. Most of the TV shows, they're fairly cool with the dialogue. You know, if it's not anything too radical. You can paraphrase, or you can change a phrase or flip a phrase or whatever, and you can get away with it. And I don't mind it if I'm working with actors, if you know, they have a suggestion for saying something a certain way, man. If it's real and it's making sense, and it's showing, it's telling the story, and they're playing that beat really well, I'm gonna go with it, man. You know, you don't turn your nose up at things that that'll help whatever it is you're doing look better. It's just not a good thing to do.
And I guess the other part of the question was in terms of the series. Have you had access where you could give feedback to the writers and ideas for what you felt, you know, might be, you know, future developments for your characters?
Oh yeah. On Voyager, we had I had discussions with the writers about individual stories as they came up, where I had a heavy storyline or heavy involvement in them, and there's some stuff we had to actually figure out because we didn't know what the answers were. We had to kind of make them up for some of that stuff. We didn't have a backstory to base them on, so we had to work together to come up with something story-wise that made sense. Other things I had issues with, I wanted to change because I didn't feel it was right for the character to say this or that. There were actions and things that I suggested we could use that they didn't have written or whatever. And I suggested some storylines that they ended up using, actually. Not specifics, but just general storylines. And they ended up putting them in there, which was great. I mean, we could have a dialogue with the writers anytime on those shows. So it was excellent. The door was always open for that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Emily, I see your question. Was that answered, or would you like to ask a different question?
Hey
Emily?
there. Hi there.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Loved Voyager, by the way. Grew up with that.
Thank you.
You sort of answered my question, but if you're willing to go into any greater detail about any encouragement or warnings or anything you have about people who want to write, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I would love that. I'm just wanting. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking to. I'm just like a willing vessel. Just want to hear whatever you have to say on, you know, warnings, general anything about writing.
Writing is the foundation. You have nothing without a script. It is the most important element of any of this business, whether it's stage, film, or television. The most perilous part of writing a story is that third act, is that last bit. How do you wrap it up? How do you end it? That's where you usually run into trouble. So focus on making sure that you get your back half of that story done. You got a great concept. You set up the dominoes, knock them down. If you set up the dominoes, knock them down. Don't go someplace and leave them standing, you know. To me, you know, making the story, the character motivation consistent. I can use examples of films that just, you know, set me off, but the writing has to make sense. We have to believe what the characters are doing. You have to believe the worst thing you see, and you see it all the time, is the characters are in the movie and the character says the other one, you know, that doesn't make any sense. And it probably doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense to the audience member as well, because it's stupid. So don't have it in there. So if the character motivation makes sense, if the path they take makes sense, that you're not sitting there going, well, scratching your head, well, why would they do that? You know, or how does that work when they just said blaggity blah for the last hour and a half? All these things have to make sense. The more interesting, of course, and twists and turns you can put in there that you have an explanation for, that's cool, that's great. Depending upon what the genre is, whatever twists, whatever approaches or angles you can come at it, if it's a horror story or if it's a vampire flick or if it's a zombie thing, or the more you can make it different, something we haven't seen about 1 million times, the better. As long as the story makes sense. And don't make it too bloody long. The movie shouldn't be any longer than the next pee break, quite frankly. You know, everybody wants to make them 3 hours long. Fuck that, man. Just, you know, it don't need to be that long. Your story ain't all that. Half the time you watch the stuff, you can cut out half an hour of it, you never miss it. A story is like a pyramid, right? A pyramid made of blocks. If you can pull 2 of those blocks out and the pyramid still stands, then you don't need the blocks. That's how you look at the stories. Stuff in there you don't need, get rid of it. You know, when it comes to shooting it in production, it's a lot less money and a lot less hassle and whatever. If you don't need that stuff, don't put it in there. And so to me, the foundation of the writing is really important. Dialogue is tricky, And some people have a knack for it and some people do not. And that's just the way it is. You've seen movies. All of you guys have seen movies. You've seen them all the time. You see television shows, you see movies, you see stories, and sometimes you're sitting there going, what in the is that? That doesn't even make sense. That's ridiculous. What is it you didn't like about that? Remember that and don't do it, you know? Don't do the same thing that you just saw look stupid, you know? You sit there and watch the movie, it starts out gangbusters. What a great concept. Wow, that's really, well, what the hell happened there? You know, because they went off the rails. Well, don't go off the rails, you know? Develop the story and carry the story out. Set up the dominoes and knock them over. Don't leave them standing, you know? So that just from a writing standpoint, you know, I don't write material from scratch. No, I'm not going to do it. You know why? Because I'd rather hire a writer who knows how to write it. That's what I do. You know, I've done revisions on script and some revisions on some scenes here and there. Yeah, I'll do that because I know I want this or that particularly, and that's not a big deal. I'm not going to sit there and write that thing from scratch, man. I'll develop a story. I'll pitch a story. I'll work with a writer on a story, but I'm not writing it. There is no way I'll hire or partner with a writer who knows how to write. Also has has the temperament for it, has the desire for it, the motivation for it, preferably the experience for it, and the knack for it, the DNA. Somebody who has the DNA, all right? Somebody who can run that track, that 50-yard dash, man, fast. You need the person who has that. You know, it is almost magic, I can tell you. The good writers, are not that many of them out there. Not that many.
Thank you, Tim. So everybody, we've got about 15 more minutes. If you have a question, please put it in chat so we can get to it. Cinnamon, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was just wondering what your favorite project has been and why.
My favorite project, working in front of camera or behind camera?
That's a good question. Both. How about both?
Yeah, let's see. As far as behind working behind camera, I'd have to say I really enjoyed working on the pilot presentation Renegades because it was a science fiction piece that was very challenging. So I enjoyed working on it as a challenge went. A lot of elements I had to come together with that make it to put it together, and a lot of fun stuff and tools to work with, and some really good talented people. Is one of my favorite projects to have worked on in recent years. The other, as far as acting, you know, there's a couple of pieces that I've worked on in the past that I enjoyed working on just because they were fun. You know, back in the day, I worked with a couple of people in Sandal Bergman, and I worked with, what's his name from Leave It to Beaver, Brad, we're going back to, what's his name?
Gary Mathers?
Yeah, it was Mathers. Yeah, he was in this piece I was in this piece with him, and and it was just fun. It was a horror piece that was on, and it was I don't know, Freddy's Nightmares or something. It was just a joke. But I enjoyed it so much because we had so much fun just working on set, you know, and it was just, I've never forgotten that. I've forgotten a lot of parts, but I've not forgotten that one in particular. I enjoyed that. And there may be a couple others scattered about, but that was one of the ones I enjoyed working on just because we had such a good laugh during that entire week. We just enjoyed working with each other. It was so easy and just so relaxed and so chill, you know, and it was all tongue in cheek and it was all kind of low budget and just slapped together. It was just fun. So I enjoyed working on it, but directorially, yeah, the Renegades was probably one of the piece had so many challenges and so many different aspects about it that were, you know, I could sink my teeth into, and I really enjoyed, you know, putting that together as far as a directorial project.
So we're going to start wrapping it up. I've got one more question, which is just a complete departure from everything we've been talking about so far. It'll be a fun thing to touch on. And then after we ask that, then I would ask you to maybe think of how, you know, if you have some final thoughts that you'd like to wrap up with. So the final question in the queue is Lindsay. Go ahead.
Hey, I was just wondering about your experience with astronomy. I was
Yes.
just on your Wikipedia page, and it has just like this throwaway line of like you're also an astronomer, and so I think there's also a picture of you with the telescope floating around.
Yes.
So just out of interest, I was just wondering if you could touch on that.
What, my interest in astronomy?
Yeah, that's
Oh.
what she's asking.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I've been an astronomer for about 30 years, 35, somewhere in there. And I've always been fascinated by actual science, and astrophysics and planetary biology, and also space science in general. And I've been hands-on with that hobby for quite a while, actually. I've got, I don't know, 6 or 7 telescopes, and I've got one that I am actually an ambassador for, that I'm representing and using in the field for them, testing it out and things like that. So to me, it's been an absolute fascination. I love the stories regarding space, and I also love fiction or nonfiction, doesn't matter. And I love the study, the science of astronomy and the study of the stars. I can't get enough of it. It's always been a fascination to me. It came upon me 30 years ago to go ahead and pursue it as a hobby. At the time on my own, and all of that stuff has changed since then dramatically, but for the better for the most part. So, and I'm still pursuing it full time whenever I get a minute, to try to keep my hands into it. And if I'm able to work on a project, that is related to that, it's good. I was on the series NASA's Unexplained File this last season. I was a contributor to it, about 4 episodes or 5 episodes, which was really a thrill. And they came to me out of the blue, once again, out of the blue, to appear on it. And I thought at the time, I said, look, okay, guys, I don't have PhD or any other letters behind my name for astrophysics. I'm not working on a chalkboard with a bunch of equations. I don't do all that. So are you sure you want me to be on this thing, I mean, I know some things about astronomy, but I'm not, PhD. And I said, well, I said, no, we still want you to be on it and such and such. I said, all right, that's cool. I'll contribute what I know, and they gave me all the information before I could read up on it and study it. So it was fun. It's a great hobby, and I really enjoy doing it. And doing that and music, it keeps me busy outside of trying to find work. So, Brad, you can ask if you want. If there's time, you can ask. Maybe there's a couple other questions. We can just squeeze them in quick if you want to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
guys, if you have some more questions, pop them in the timeline. You also do some advocacy for some groups like Planetary Society.
Absolutely, yes. Do Planetary Society, work with Bob Picardo on that, and also Los Angeles Astronomical Society. I work with Laura Danley up at Griffiths Observatory for some of her events as well. It's always fun.
I
Always
have
fun.
kind of a funny story. I went stargazing with you once, and
Yeah.
I had my new Meade computerized telescope, and I think you thought that was really quaint because we got out there and you had that manual Dobsonian, and I was punching in numbers trying to find stuff, and you're like, oh, here's the Hercules cluster, and here's the Ring Nebula, and you could just navigate the sky like an astronomer of old.
Yeah, because when I started, they didn't have computerized telescopes. They
Yep.
didn't exist for consumers. So, so I had to learn the sky. I had to learn the constellations. I had to learn where the objects were, and once you started looking for them and finding them, you just remember where they are.
Yeah.
Most of them are summer skies, and it's you take them out, and I can still do it now. But yeah, and most of the stuff that I look for were things that were substantial in the eyepiece. I don't really bother looking for objects that I really can't see that well, and they're so faint and so small. Who cares, So I leave those to the larger scopes and bigger projects. The ones that I have now can look for the smaller stuff, and they're all. I'm ironically enough demonstrating a computerized telescope for Unistellar, so that one can find all kinds of things, and it's really, really good. But the manual Dobsonian, I still have it. I still have the same one, by the way, that you have.
Oh, nice.
And it still works great. And yeah, for bright stuff, great stuff, that's what I go to look for. I still use it.
I don't have any more questions in the queue, so let me add on to the astronomy question. When you take friends out for viewing, what are some of your go-to objects that you like to look at?
Generally in the summer skies is where all the objects tend to be that are really good, because you're looking at the Milky Way galaxy through through the actual side view of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stars and things and objects in there. So all the nebulas in the Sagittarius constellation. That's the Eagle Nebula, the Omega, the Trifid, and the Lagoon, the Ring Nebula, the Hercules cluster. There's the two galaxies off the Big Dipper. Actually, four: the Whirlpool Galaxy, and also the M82, M81, which are off the other side. There's also the Andromeda Galaxy and Pegasus. There's double stars also. They're really pretty. So those tend to be the objects that I go to in the summer skies. They're just the biggest and the most spectacular in the eyepieces when you get them going optically.
Yeah.
I can find some other things with the computers and the imagers, but I can't, with the manual, just the manual eyeball, look in the eyepiece and see it. Those are the things I usually go for.
Nice.
A number of objects, yeah.
Emily's got a question here.
Yes.
She'd like to hear a little bit about your band and your music, and how you manage sidelines like that with such a time commitment in the business.
The music is, I got to tell you, the music is something that I have been doing for 45 years plus, much longer than not a little longer than I was doing acting as far as studying it and stuff. I started playing music 15, 16 years old, and I still perform with my band whenever I get a chance to. I've played all types of music over the years. I've recorded over the years, CDs and things. And ironically enough, and I should say ironically enough, but coincidentally enough, I did book an acting gig on NCIS just last year. I think it was last year, 2018, 2019. I don't remember which one it was. I booked this gig on that show, and it was the role of a bar owner, a nightclub owner in Louisiana who also had a house band that he played with. And so I did book the lead role, but they wanted me, before I got it, to confirm. They wanted to know if I played blues guitar because they wanted to shoot the band playing live, not to playback. They didn't want to do it to playback. They wanted to do it live. And so I thought, well, that's interesting because normally that doesn't happen. So they asked me to send a self-tape of me playing and singing blues guitar, which I did. And that basically clinched the role. So if I had not been playing on a regular basis, I would not have booked that job. And that was a really good gig. And I loved that gig. It was a really good, that was one of my top favorites as well, because I got to go to Louisiana. I got to meet these guys from Louisiana, these musicians from Louisiana, work in the studio with them for 7 or 8 hours on the day after I arrived. And then we got a chance to put all these 3 songs together that were going to be in the show, or do the arrangements, do the rehearsing. The singer they brought in from Broadway to go ahead and be the lead singer in the band. And then when we played the stuff in the club, we put the band in the club, and we got a chance to film it live. And we played 2 or 3 songs live, and they filmed them live, and they used the live performances when we did them.
You said that was on NCIS?
NCIS New Orleans, yes.
According to your IMDb, that episode is called Ties That Bind.
Ties That Bind, correct.
4th season.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. And that was, again, I would not have been able to book it if I was not able to play blues guitar that well. And the reason I keep playing is for that reason. I've had a couple of times where I've auditioned for people that wanted me to play bass. I also play bass. They wanted the character to play bass. I went into the room with the bass guitar for the audition. At that time, we were going into the room, sat down with them, and I played bass on this song for them and demonstrated it for them. I didn't book that gig, but I've had to play 2 or 3 times for parts. And I happened to book the NCIS one because I was able to play. So we're going to keep playing music. We're going to keep doing it because I don't know when the next one's going to be. Long time ago, I played Crossroads. I played Robert Johnson in the movie Crossroads. I had to work with Ry Cooder, play blues slide guitar. I hadn't played slide guitar before, but I had to learn how to play slide guitar. And we played the song live. We shot it live. That was a long time ago. So
did you use a metal slide, a glass slide?
Yeah, I used a metal slide at the time. Yeah, metal one. It's got more grit to it, more bite. Yeah.
Emily wants to know what it was like working with Steve Vai.
Steve Vai. I didn't actually work with Steve Vai because we didn't shoot. We weren't in the same scenes. I worked with Ry Cooter, who was the music consultant. He was the consultant on the piece. So I did work directly with him. I actually met with him and we went over the song. We played Charlie. We played Robert Johnson's Crossroads in his original version, not the version that I play with my band, but a completely different version, just him and guitar. And I had to learn his style I'd learned the song the way he plays it, which is real tricky.
Yeah.
So I had to work with Ry Cooter to get the actual tuning, because we had to tune the guitar differently and to get the slide going and the vocals and everything. And it worked great. It was fun. Quite a challenge at the time. So again, having the opportunity to play guitar and know what you're doing is, that can benefit me at some point in time. It already has.
Was that something like an open chord tuning, like an open?
Yeah, it's an open E. Yeah, it's an open E, open D, open E. I think it is for that, to be able to get the slide, because you're playing up top the neck. Yeah, the D. It's a different tuning for blues. So
one of my favorite guitar players is George Harrison, who does a lot of slide.
Oh yeah. Oh, the master. All those guys are good, man.
Yep.
I like, was it Bonnie Raitt? She's amazing.
Yep.
She's amazing on slide guitar, so it's great. Yeah.
If we're not pressing our luck with time, Chris Osby's got a quick question.
Yes.
You want to ask it?
Yeah.
So I see that you voice acted for video games too.
Yeah.
A few of which I've actually played and enjoyed myself. What is it like being a voice actor for video games?
Doing voice acting for anything is very different than acting for camera. I will tell you that right up front. If you're doing voiceover work, especially playing a character, not doing narration necessarily, but if you're playing a character for animation, particularly animation, commercials, animation, and or video games, that kind of thing, playing a character voice, it's really tricky, because if you've been acting for a long time and you walk into that thing with a microphone and you think you know what you're doing when you start talking, but in fact, you're probably falling short from what it needs to be. The voice acting does not have the camera. It's just your voice. So all of the emotional nuances and valleys and peaks have to come out in your voice only. So something that you would do voice acting wise, you may not do on camera. You wouldn't do it that way on camera, but you have to do it as a voice actor, because otherwise the listener will not hear all of the emotion and all the nuances in those emotions have to come out in just the words. All of those inflections have to be very specific. And I mean very specific in order for the character to come alive in a voice acting role. I learned that the first time I went in to do voice work. I did voice work on Spider-Man, the animated series Spider-Man, years ago. And that was the first time I went in to do VO work. And I was like, holy crap, this is really hard, because the director was just, he was just pounding me to get, these nuances out on every single take. So you do each line about 300 times in order to get it right. And that's when I learned. And after, we did about a day or two of work on that. And after that, I was like, all right, okay, now I see I understand what he's talking about. Now I understand how this works. So when you do VO work, you have to think in terms of only. Your voice is the only thing anybody hears. Your voice is the only thing that anybody can understand. So you have to convey everything about that character, everything about that moment in those beats with only your voice. So that you have to really focus on that. You have no camera to help you, no expression. They can't see your expression. It's just your voice. So even the feel before you open your mouth, you have to have something in the nuance that says the character feels this way or is reacting that way. So it's very cool. That's specific to voice acting.
That's really fascinating. So even a familiar character, like when you would do Tuvok for a video game, you would see that role differently.
You still have to be focused on the fact that it is just your voice. So you still have to have the nuances. That character will be a little bit easier, obviously, because I know the character already and I've done it for so long, and the character isn't as emotional as others. But when you're doing characters that are emotional and that are reacting to things emotionally, like people do normally, that's tricky, man. That's real tricky. I just finished 2 video games just last month. I did 2 different games. I got to do one. I got to do something else this month. An animated project this month I've got to work on for a feature film. So That's going to be even a little different. I've done audiobooks before, and which are not quite as intense because you're basically doing narration and you're basically reading the characters, not so much as playing them. But the animated stuff is heavy, man. That's tricky stuff. Very tricky.
Do you have your own setup for doing voiceover, or do you go into a studio?
Yeah, I have a setup here, but it's only for certain things. I got to do a podcast this week, for example, a character on a podcast. I'll record that here. But if it's for video game stuff, I go to a studio because they have better mics than I do.
Yeah.
And they also have, nowadays they have to have a networking software so that the director can listen in on the session and give notes and things. And I don't have that software. So
With video games, have you done any motion capture?
I have done mocap. Not a lot of fun. My agent kept saying, "Oh my God, you're going to have such a great time." I said, no, that wasn't a great time. Motion cap is a very uncomfortable wetsuit that you're wearing with ping pong balls stuck all over it, and you always got to calibrate the camera. You spend half the day calibrating the camera, and then you got to do the scene. But if you do anything outside that suit, if you walk off the set, if you go to the bathroom or do whatever, as soon as you leave, you got to come back and recalibrate the camera. And it's just, it's uncomfortable, and it's a whole day of wearing that crap, and it's not a lot of fun. I did not particularly enjoy mocap, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'll do it if I get booked again, but it's not that great.
Yeah.
I would rather go into a booth and go on the microphone.
Yeah.
I did work on Symbiotic Titans as a series. Oh my God, was that fun. That's the best gig in the world. Just so you guys know, the best gig in the world is animated series, especially if you're able to go in a studio and work with all the other actors. That is cherry. There is no better job. I don't care. You can roll out of bed and go in your robe to the studio in your pajamas, do your lines, and then go home and get paid forever because of the reruns. That's the best gig on the planet. And the hardest, absolutely the hardest to get. I've been working on trying to get another one of those for I don't know how long, but I worked on one for about a season and a half, Symbiotic Titans. And I've never had so much fun in my life. So it's just great. Damn it, I want to do one of those again. So it's tough. Those gigs are tough to get. Really tough.
Tim, I can't thank you enough for your generosity. This has been just a fascinating, passionate, entertaining evening. And I think everybody really got a lot out of it. And I enjoyed spending time with you again. It's been too long.
Very good. Yeah.
Would you like to have some remarks to kind of wrap it all up and tie it together for us?
Well, I would just say that, whatever you guys are going to end up pursuing, whether it's acting, directing, writing, or working in production, whatever that's going to be, just understand that it does take a lot of focus and motivation and diligence. And you're going to have to be able to accept a rejection on a number of different levels from time to time. Get your chops up, study, learn what you're doing, focus on what you're doing. Take any opportunity you can to broaden your knowledge base and your skills and your chops. And if that requires working on projects that you're not making any money for or paying for, if you're able to observe, if you're able to network, if you're able to get a mentorship with somebody who's actually doing the job and doing the gigs, anything you can to get the next step ahead of the person behind you, because there's always somebody behind you that's trying to get the same job. And it's a very, very competitive business, extremely competitive. And so you have to be, if you're throwing your hat in the ring, you got to be ready and just keep at it. Focus on it, That's all I can say. And I cannot, there's no guarantees. It can happen or it can't happen, It's just the way it is.
Tim, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
I hope you have a great week, and I hope you get some more of those voice jobs that you love so much.
I'm working on it.
All right, buddy.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.
Hey, guys. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Absolute pleasure. A lot of fun.
Good.
So cool.
Thank you. This is one of the best we've done so far. That was awesome.
Agreed.
Terrific. Yeah, Tim is really something special. I was very happy that he was available and agreed to do this. Thank you guys for adjusting to a different day. Tim had something going on with his family yesterday and wasn't able to work us in.
Nice. Great.
All right, everybody. Good night. Have a nice week.
You
Thank
too.
you too.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.